So I told her to get lost, and now she's in tears.
When it comes to sequels and spin-offs to beloved, if not iconic shows, it's always a slippery slope. They can have a pretty hard time standing on their own, and often lean a bit too much on cameos to be truly entertaining in their own right. With That 70's Show, there's also the fact that the signs of the times are a lot less amusing now than they were back then. But it seems like That 90's Show is learning from its parents' mistakes, and there are a lot more differences between the two than just cast and a few decades. From way more relatable, actual teenagers to a much more wholesome humor, these are some of the reasons why That 90's Show is so much better than That 70's Show. Much like most sitcoms from the late 90s and early 2000s, That 70's Show didn't really include many diverse characters. Fez was really the only non-white character, and he was treated pretty poorly. I mean, we never even find out his country of origin, and while we could assume that he's from Morocco, after all, that's where a city named Fez can be found. But Fez was just never really given a true backstory, which is sad. That 90's Show, on the other hand, actually made an effort to have a much more diverse cast. There are 2 Asian characters and a black woman, all in starring roles. That 90's Show is also a bit more realistic on a few other levels. While some have complained that the spin-off is aimed at a younger audience, at least the cast now consists of actual teenagers.
I think I might be a one-woman guy.
You hear that, Jackie? Fez is a one-woman guy.
Yeah, surprising, but true.
That 70's Show was aimed at an adult audience while still using teenagers to tell the story, except that the actors playing said teenagers were all between 18 and 22 years old. Well, all except Mila Kunis, who lied about her age to get on the show and was the only real teenager in the cast. But the cast of That 70's Show also never really behaved like teenagers, which stands in stark contrast with That 90's Show. Now the gang is portrayed by actors who are actually between 13 and 18 years old. Not only do they look like teenagers, they're able to behave like real teenagers in a much more convincing way. That isn't to say that the adults of That 90's Show didn't undergo some changes as well, even though Red Foreman will always be one of the most iconic sitcom fathers. He was also really controversial. Red was constantly verbally abusing his son, Eric, in That 70's Show, and extremely condescending to his wife, Kitty. We learn to understand Red, and he is undoubtedly the result from his own strict upbringing. But that kind of behavior just won't do in today's day and age, even if it's supposed to represent the way people, men, would often behave in real life as well. Luckily, Red seems to have softened up a bit in That 90's Show. He's still a grumpy old man, and even more of a loner, but at least he's not as aggressive with the people around him as he was in That 70's Show. Another really nice change to the balance of That 90's Show is the fact that Kitty has become a more central character to the story. Despite her limited screen time on That 70's Show, Kitty was universally loved and extremely underrated, especially for the time period. It would have been nice if That 70's Show had put more emphasis on the importance of a woman's job to keep the house running all on her own.
Brad, you need to go over there and apologize to Bob. He came in here all excited about his idea, and you just made him feel bad about himself.
Yeah.
That mistake has been corrected in That 90's Show. Kitty is finally given the credit that she's due, being the glue that keeps the whole ensemble together. Again, she did the same in That 70's Show. It was just never acknowledged. But That 90's Show has been treating its female characters a lot better in general. There was a lot of blatant and internalized misogyny not so hidden in That 70's Show. This was best illustrated by Donna's obvious dislike of Jackie, who she considered to be too feminine. Jackie's character is treated really poorly in general, though, just like Fez. For most of That 70's Show, Jackie just serves as a joke for the show. But unlike Fez, at least Jackie was given some character development later on in the show. That 90's Show has definitely stepped up its game when it comes to creating more complex and interesting female characters, if only because the protagonist of the series is actually a girl. But aside from that, Gwen and Nikki are given true storylines and actual character arcs, and Gwen and Leia's relationship is just extremely wholesome as well. They give an accurate representation of what relationships between girls can look and feel like, which means that 90's show is finally helping the franchise doing something that even to this day, not every show accomplishes: passing the Bechdel test. Another huge step forward for that 90's show when it comes to representation is how it looks at identity. The spin-off features a character named Ozzy, a gay character that's trying to come to terms with his on his own terms. While it's far from ideal to have a token gay character, at least it's a start towards including more LGBTQIA+ among its main characters. It's true that there was one queer character in that 70's show as well, Buddy Morgan, but he appeared in only one episode. It said that Buddy was supposed to be a recurring character, but sadly, the audience responded with a mix of homophobia and dislike towards the idea that Buddy may steal Eric away from Donna, so he was never heard from again. Luckily, we've made some progress as a society, and characters like Ozzy can be incorporated into popular TV shows as well. Hopefully, there will be more and better representation in the future, and we'll get to know Ozzy's boyfriend, Etienne, better as their relationship grows, which is also something that 90's show has been scoring a lot of points with. The relationships in the spin-off are a lot less toxic than they were in that 70's show. In a way, Eric and Donna were an amazing couple, but most of the other relationships in that 70's show were extremely toxic. From Jackie and Kelso always fighting, not knowing how to communicate, and Kelso constantly underestimating her, which, coming from Kelso, was just absurd. Who was he to underestimate anyone? And Red's tendency to be way too condescending to Kitty was really over the top, especially when compared to its parent show. That 90's show is definitely giving us much more balanced relationships. From Ozzy and Etienne, who give us much-needed representation of what a healthy queer relationship can look like, to Nate and Nikki, who show us how to accept people as they are. And while Leia and Jay's relationship is a bit rocky at times, it's definitely a lot cuter than Eric and Donna ever were together. But that's just it. You can criticize that 90's show for being targeted at a younger audience and having lost its edge. Not everyone is missing the sarcastic and often dark humor of that 70's show. That 90's show is just a lot more wholesome. Shows don't need to make uncomfortable jokes at the expense of others to still be funny. In fact, they shouldn't make uncomfortable jokes at the expense of others at all. It's also nice that the stoner trope isn't so central to the story anymore. While it's still included in that 90's show, it is a relief to see that, despite the target audience for the series being younger, a lot of aspects of that 90's show feel a whole lot more mature than that 70's show ever was. And that's it. These were some of the reasons why that 90's show is so much better than that 70's show.